I had, I guess, what you would call my first psychotic break recently. And there's so much that goes into what this experience meant for me, and I'll probably be writing about it and exploring it my entire life because it was life-changing. Um, and I have respect for this experience, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I think that's an important place to start.
It changed my life in the sense that it undercut the models I had of who I thought I was. All the socialization and child development that had left me with a very strong somebodyness, it cut that out. And of course there was fear in losing that familiar identity. But there was always also wonder, because I touched a place in myself that was, it was behind all my social roles.
The type that I've done the most work on myself has been the type that's associated with a mystical experience. And that would typically include a lot of the experiences we associate with mysticism, a sense of new knowledge, new understandings. Now I get it. Now I understand what's going on. Ecstatic mood, elevated mood. And it can include some perceptual alterations. Many people in the midst of a really intense mystical experience will have white light experiences. They'll see themselves or other people surrounded by white light.
Read from Carl Jung's Psyche and Symbol. It is of no ultimate advantage to deny or reason away or ridicule such seemingly abnormal or out-of-the-way experiences. They should not get lost because they contain an intrinsic value of the individuality, the loss of which entails a definite damage to one's personality. One should be aware of the high esteem which in past centuries was felt for such experiences. Even if in the end a rational explanation cannot be reached, one knows at least that one is not the only one confronted by a merely imaginary wall. One still shares the common human fate, and one is not excluded from humanity by a subjective defect. On the contrary, one gains a new courage to accept and integrate the irrationality of one's own life and of life in general. I feel at a great loss as to how to tell the story. There's various images that come to mind, storylines. There are many storylines. One prominent one was that I believed I was growing into a tree. It kind of happened like I was sitting on my couch, which is brown corduroy, almost the texture and maybe shape of a long tree trunk. And as I was sitting on it, I started feeling myself growing into it. So I was the tree, the roots. And this was my understanding, again, not intellectually, not conceptually, just felt. I was becoming the root of the earth. And with this was an understanding of my place in the cosmos. As a grounded being, I felt myself being rooted. There were sounds of being inside a tree trunk, being the tree trunk. All of it was terrifying and beautiful at the same time, but I could feel pulling in my veins certain things as I would feel myself taking shape. It was as if I was stretching to absorb all of this knowledge. Now, what kind of knowledge am I talking about? Well, I'd say it's symbolic, intuitive knowledge. For instance, this is a mandala I made a while ago that during the episode, as I saw it, I realized it was a map of my consciousness. And here you see the tree that I was found myself to be growing into. Dreams I had had the year leading up before my 26th birthday. These are the candles that I had. It was very much like I was saving up all these things in my unconscious, and there's this building up to the event. And so that's why I would have things in almost like a ritualistic way. Here, this image you see that I mentioned from earlier of these are God's hands, a little statue my father gave me. And so this became a big thing in one moment when my boyfriend's mother came over to check on me because things weren't going well. And I offered her up a memory stick that I'd placed in God's hands, which I actually think is a pretty beautiful and concise metaphor as to what was going on. All of this knowledge was becoming too much at that moment, and here's the memory stick that represents all the knowledge, and I'm putting it in God's hands and asking her to hide it, take it away from me, because I wanted to come back to being just a normal person. We live in a world where information is infinitely more prized over wisdom. And I believe this has a lot to do with the way we treat mental illness, the way we treat psychosis, those experiences of which we are not accustomed to, both in experiencing them, whether we do or not, or discussing them.
I think one of the things that's happening in our culture today is people are starting to wake up and realize that spirituality is not about belief. It's not about what group you belong to, and it's actually in some ways not even about what you do. It's about your consciousness, and that means it's about experience. So spirituality comes from the inside out, not from the outside in. And that's why so many teachers today are realizing that just writing philosophy is not enough. Just telling people what to believe is not enough. We have to lead people to experience so that they will know. Instead of just gathering information and being well educated, they will have understanding and they will have wisdom. Ultimately, the transformation of self and the transformation of consciousness comes through experience.
Something incredibly unique to my experience was that time felt very eternal. So many narratives that as they would come about would be non-linear, and my consciousness would jump from context to context. Many people believe they are Christ, the Buddha, God, what have you. I felt myself to strongly be Mary in some way, whether it was Mother Mary or some archetypal Mary that was going to save the world. In fact, as I speak of it, I believe my understanding of becoming a tree was rooted in this moment when I had wandered outside, no clothes. I was stuck in a time warp experience in which I was being compelled through this narrative. It was very much sped up and slowed down, and much like a tape that's just spiraling out of control, and then all of a sudden it gets wound back up and it's playing for you perfectly. And all of the things that were skipping and not making sense suddenly playing out in beautiful, perfect form. And all of the earth around me was speaking. All of the insects, the branches, it all was vibrating and spoke as if it was making a pact with me to save and heal the earth. It was very profound, beautiful, incredible experience, very hard to put into words. Despite this, I've attempted to tell you one version of the story, though there may be many more to come. Yet I think that it's worth noting that this experience was ultimately healing and transformative for me. Certainly there were elements of the experience that were difficult and traumatic, yet I feel the ultimate metaphor of the pact I made was an agreement to heal myself. I was mother, I was Mary, I was all of those things which I felt myself to be. And I feel like I've followed through with that aspect of the agreement. And this all has great meaning to me. It's my story. It's my experience. It's my break from reality.